please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Ms. Simon, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Schron,
Here.
Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown is absent at the moment. Ms. Baker. We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Council President Brady is in attendance.
Thank you very much. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you very much. You have in your packets the minutes from the July 1st, 2019 meeting, and I would ask if there is a motion.
So move.
Is there a second? Second, okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the July 1st meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Ayes have it and the minutes are approved. Okay, in my opinion, the entire discussion today relates to the main sale contract modification. So we're gonna start by reading the resolution 2019-0158 into the record, and then we're gonna move to the ERP presentation to provide background on what brings us to this point. So, Ms. Ashley.
Resolution number 2019-0158, authorizing an amendment to contract number CE 1800132-01 with Main Cell LLC for staff augmentation for the Enterprise Resource Planning Project for the period 9/17/2018 to 9/16/2019, to extend the time period to 3/31/2020, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $1,453,899.
Thank you very much. We have very difficult news to deal with today, both on cost and schedule. I am deeply disappointed by these events. When I ask whether we could have done better, the answer is obviously yes. However, when I look at the things that I have done, it's only sometimes that I'm able to look back and say, I did that about as well as I could have done it. Quite often, I have to say that with greater care and foresight, I could have done it better. I also don't give any support to the idea that we should have never done the project in the first place. Continuing with 5 or 6 20-year-old systems that don't talk to each other is just not the way to manage the complexity of 21st century large county government. We must dig in, make it work, and do it right from today forward. I know there's going to be criticism expressed, and it's justified. I'm just asking everyone to be temperate and judicious. These are not easy times, and we all must work together and get through it. So I'd like to call forth the administration to begin the presentation. And for those following along on your packet, I'm asking the project director to start the presentation with slide 9, which deals with the changes to the project schedule. And then we're going to move on to slide 35, which goes over the changes to the budget. Those two things are the heart of what we're dealing with, and I want to make sure that we get through those things and have plenty of time to ask questions about them, and so that we can then deal with the main sale contract. And if we have time at the end, we can go through some of the other sections that we're skipping over. So please proceed.
Excuse me, Mr. Ryan, can you press the button?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first of all want to thank the council for its support of the project, the vision expressed by the requirement for this system in terms of what the county needs, and the support of me personally as we work through this process together. One of the folks I work for says, bad news never gets better with age. It's not like wine. So somebody asked me before the meeting here whether I felt rushed to put this together, and the answer is no. I think if there's news to be presented, good or bad, it needs to get to the council in a timely manner, and that's what we're doing today. Okay. I can't see if we have the right slide up or not here.
Yes, you do.
We do. Okay. So the schedule adjustments that we're looking at today on. I'll just go through these as a group. First of all, we are presenting. My apologies.
Okay.
Okay, so this slide really embodies all of the changes in the schedule that we envision, and the one-line reasons that we can expand on for each one. Essentially, we're taking and dividing things into these new groups of targets. The reasons for the delays I'll cover here in a few minutes in the next slide down, but going through these one at a time here. The agenda manager and GHR data refresh validation and talent management that we have planned for August are all preparatory things that we need for other downstream systems. You can see outlined in red on this schedule the fact that we have dependencies on essentially three things here that are important. One, we have the JHR data refresh, which is getting all of the employee data necessary, correct, and ready for load and with integrity. The fact that the huge downstream effect of that is evidenced in the schedule is obvious to everyone, I think. But that's one of the things we're dealing with, and we'll talk about that in some depth here in a subsequent slide. The other thing that we're dealing with on the accounting system side is the requirement to make sure that we have a solid bank reconciliation process in place. We have a 5-year-old audit finding on cash reconciliation and cash management that needs to be mitigated, and the ERP system can do that. But what we've discovered is that the only way to really do that is to do that by a full 1-month reconciliation test, if you will, and process to make sure that we understand exactly what all of the different anomalies we have in cash reconciliation and how to deal with them within the Infor system to make sure that when we do go live, that reconciliation process is solid and that we've mitigated the cash reconciliation findings over the last 5 years. That process has taken us longer. So that said, those items, along with some concerns just about staffing levels, there's a slide further down here that talks about the fact that we have rotated for a variety of reasons. Some significant number of medical issues on staff, along with some folks that have rotated off and found other positions. We've rotated through a lot of key county employees that are difficult to replace, that have essential knowledge, and really keep us from running, in some departments, running some things in parallel that we might otherwise attempt and had in the schedule attempted to do. So we just don't have the staff to do that. So all of those things combined cause these schedule changes. So the first block, agenda manager, GHR refresh, and talent management, those things are scheduled essentially for August, September. The changes to agenda manager need to be made before we implement procurement. So that's why it's on the schedule. I hadn't reflected that before. It is a dependency. It's on our project plan that way. But that can be implemented in August in advance of all the other procurement work that we need to do. The second block, the October-November block, we
On
have. Yes,
on
sir.
On the GHR refresh, which is listed for September 13th, there's a slide that says that this activity is currently 84% completed. If it's 84% completed, why does it take from now until September 13th to launch that item?
So the overall project included, for GHR refresh, included an item that's a data validation item prior to the implementation of integrated system test and user acceptance testing for GHR. The data that feeds that, what we've discovered is the data that feeds that was not in as good a shape as we had hoped. As a matter of fact, it was in terrible shape. So what we've done is launched an effort to cleanse and validate that data. And that one item is stopping the remainder of the test. Once that's done, then we'll be able to proceed through that process with the remaining steps. But the data validation step has taken much longer than expected.
So you're saying you have to clean up the data, and then after that you have to do the testing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not just validating data. We're actually in the process of cleansing it, cleaning it up. It's data from multiple sources. So we've got at least 10 or 12 different sources for employee data around the county, not including even the additional sources for many of the non-executive agencies have their own databases, and it's a matter of pulling all that together. So, okay. So the October-November block includes all of the procurement activities, and that's dependent upon bank reconciliation. You should not bring, put it that way, should not bring accounts payable, procurement, and cash and treasury up separately. They need to come up at the same time and go live together. So while procurement actually will be ready ahead of some of those other systems, we really can't launch it until all of the bank reconciliation issues is completed, and we have all three of those systems ready to go. So that's why you see it might seem odd to have a dependency in procurement on bank reconciliation process, but it's because we need to bring all the systems up simultaneously. And so bank reconciliation becomes the long pole in the tent for that, so to speak. So for January, we just have one item, expense management planned. And right now, don't anticipate an issue with that. Strategic sourcing and contract management, all the way out in March. One would ask, well, why don't we start that sooner? The decision from the project team, myself, is that we just don't have the staff to run, just because of staff rotation and current staffing levels within procurement area, to run that in parallel with implementing the purchase order requisition system and procurement that we're bringing live in October. So that means that activity can't actually start until we finish the go live in October. So doing the scheduling the way we should to make sure that we allow enough time for that. The best we can do for that is to move it all the way out to March at this point in time, so that it does not conflict with the next set of go lives in procurement. The asset management and grants management and accounts receivable we have out in March as well. And those actually cannot start until after we finish the October go lives as well, just because of you only have limited number of staffs that can work on all of those systems. We literally in fiscal have the same people working across the board on all those different implementations.
Why couldn't you do some of them in February?
Why couldn't we do some of them in February? Just because of the number of activities that have to take place. We have scheduled this in detail, and we know how long it will take to actually get this done. So we've got a very detailed project plan that covers that. And if we could do it in February, we would. I have had, even over this weekend, as we were looking at this before this presentation, put a lot of work into just, is there anything at all that we can move to a different position? And that specific question was asked both by myself to Infor and Infor back to me. Is there anything that we can do? And March is the right time frame.
Okay.
Okay. Last but certainly not least is the April implementation of workforce management, payroll, and then the other two dependency items on GHR refresh data, which are total rewards and compensation management. So the reality on payroll and workforce management, I've identified these things as risks before. I've identified the data, GHR data refresh as a risk before. The fact of the matter is that risk has come full circle at this point in time, and we need to go live on a quarter boundary. So that would take us all the way out to April 1st. Now, not only is the quarter boundary make sense, but the other thing is that the issue at this point that's forcing the delay is that we have actually, we had planned for 4 complete, and sort of the bare minimum, 4 complete end-to-end parallel tests for payroll and workforce management, all the way from entering time through delivery of a paycheck and the reporting associated with that. 4 is sort of the bare minimum. As we began to have data validation issues, we've pushed right into that testing schedule. In the monthly report that was distributed along with this, the companion really to this briefing, I think I made the statement that could you go? Somebody asked me over the weekend here. Are we sure we couldn't go live in January? We could go live in January, but we have a high risk of failure. Probably less than 50%. I was asked in another meeting earlier. What did I think the probability was that we would have to push the schedule for payroll and workforce management past December? I said at that point in time, the probability was maybe 60 or 70%. Probably 60 was more like it. At this point in time, I rate our risk and the probability of success is less than 50%, just because of where we are with the data and knowing what has to happen, not wanting to put the testing of this at risk. It's absolutely necessary that we test it correctly for all of the county employees' sake. Okay? So that is the schedule.
So,
yes, sir.
Can you explain why the scheduling and mitigation process is not working? I mean, we've had a number of events where we design a schedule, we identify what the risks to the schedule are, we put a mitigation plan in place for each of the risks, and yet even with the risks identified in the mitigation plan identified, we're not able to execute it, and we keep having these rollbacks. What are we missing in this process?
I think we're missing, and I'll point at myself. I think we've underestimated the state of the county's data in terms of its integrity and in terms of the work it takes to actually get that data converted, clearly. And even though we've certainly put a lot of effort into looking at that data, trying to deal with that, as we approach each module and get ready to go live, we start, one of the very first things is we do a conference room pilot. We look at the sources for that data, and we try to make an assessment for what it's going to take to convert the data. Until you actually start converting the data, you don't always understand how good or bad that data actually is and ready for conversion, and how much work it's going to take to not just validate what's there, but to transform that data into something that's clean and that's loadable into your new system. And so that process, I think we have the right process in place to look at the data. If we failed in some places, and obviously we have failed in some levels here, it's maybe not getting the team to take enough of an advanced look to avoid this kind of problem. Okay.
Are all the remaining Go Live events listed on this list that we have in front of us?
Yes, sir. All the modules are listed.
Okay, fine. Okay. Councilman Tron.
Jack, one of the things that we've kept hearing from ZIG is that, and I'm sure you have it, but I would like to see it, that each one of these are broken down into subcategories and tasks, and where are we on each one of those tasks. And for the last 18 months, more than that, it seems like, I think, he's been telling us, tell us what the tasks are and tell us what the percentage is of completion of the subcategories, which then roll up into all these big, on these big go lives. Do we have that, and as to where they are? Because his analogy was, if there's 50 tasks and you've got 25 done towards a big item, it gives us, the council, the ability to at least better understand. We keep getting go live dates, and they keep rolling and rolling and rolling.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to find fault with you, or I personally believe this all boils down to leadership at the highest level of the county, and it belongs there, because any good leader would have had this under control a long time ago. They would have listened to this body that suggested that we have a leader years ago in regards to this. I'm glad we have you at this point in time, but subcomponent tasks, are those readily available to go with every one of these categories so we could see them? They have to be on a master report
Absolutely.
someplace.
If I could redirect from this slide that I'm on here for a minute.
I don't need to interrupt your flow, but I would like to see a column on here that says there were 25 tasks that go with agenda management with OnBase, and of those 25, 22 are completed. So therefore, it's logical we're going to hit that August date out there.
If I could direct your attention to the slide that I have up now, okay? 'Cause that's not a total, complete answer to your question, but this is the slide that I have in every weekly report and every monthly report at a top level. These numbers are extracted directly from the project plan. And as you can see from that slide, we've got a couple thousand tasks, 1,908 at this point in time, tasks. And we can see how many of those tasks are completed week by week. That's one of the reasons we went to this approach. Now, I believe that what you're asking for is the level underneath this.
It is.
And we can certainly produce that, and that work breakdown structure in the project plan is there.
It's not, our best advice is coming from our support person who's giving us our guidance. And he has been asking for this, suggesting for this, that we would be seeing this. And this is not the first time that the management has heard this. They've been hearing it for a year and a half now, at least. It seems like even longer than that. I mean, it's got to the point where it's almost ridiculous that this project has gone on this long. I would think that in your professional time, you probably have not seen projects drag out this long on a project of this nature. Would that be a fairly correct assumption?
I have seen some other government projects drag out for different reasons, some similar to this scenario and some not.
All because of a leadership problem, or not because of?
Leadership in some cases, just complexity of data in other cases, depending on the entity, without calling out any of my previous customers or others for that matter. But that's not an excuse for anything. That's just the reality is that these things are complex. I know you've implemented ERP systems in your own organization as well. You understand that. I think that some
With
of the
Infor,
factors
by the way.
Sir?
It was an Infor product too, by the way. Two
I didn't
times.
realize that, but okay.
Yeah, Sightline's an Infor product.
Okay. Sure,
So
it is.
while you have this slide up here,
Yes, sir.
It says total actual tasks 1,908, and that's up from 757 from the last report. It says an increase as detailed planning is done for better schedule control. My question is, have we now identified all the tasks through to the end of the project, or will there be more tasks identified down the road, and if so, how much farther along will it be until we at least have all the tasks that are going to need to be done identified?
I believe we've identified tasks. Let me just talk about the methodology we're using here. So when I say we're increasing the number of tasks, as we approach each go live block, okay, we've got sort of a template approach that says, here's what we need to put in place for training, here's what we need to put in place for change management, here are the tasks that it takes to implement that particular module. So we didn't, just in the interest of time and focus, for some of the farther out modules, accounts receivable might be a good example. We don't have the detailed list for accounts receivable in there because we haven't actually started that, but we know that we need to build that out at some point in time. Prior to, well in advance of when that happens. That doesn't mean we can't estimate the time for that, because we have a template for doing that covers most of the tasks. So there are a few areas, not many, there are a few areas that are not built out. I guess that would be the best way to answer the question. So you'll see us increase some of these, but in general, we have this built out in a fair amount of detail.
Okay.
The other irony is that here we are years into this, and we still have never gotten a cost justification analysis as far as the gains that we're going to receive as the county for now, which approaching $30 million in regards to this. We have seen after the fact that some folks in the areas of public, on our public side of the aisle, as far as public works, we've gotten some justification, but the rest of this, we still have never even seen justification that says this is a good thing. I truly, like our chairman, believe that you cannot run a 2021 organization with the old forms of technology, but surely we sort of should have seen this by now. And I would think that of the projects you've seen, analysis of success and gains should have been done way before the end of this project.
Yeah, I've seen a brief, since I took over as director here, just about a month and a half, 2 months ago, I have seen a benefits analysis. I haven't had a chance to really look at that in detail. I believe that it's grossly understated, just in a general sense. And I agree with you that I think that benefits analysis needs to be done for a variety of reasons. If nothing else, as an encouragement to everybody else that there are benefits that we're not even recognizing out there. To do that, we need to take the time to sit down and focus and do that. And quite honestly, I need to do that or organize the staff to do that. We just haven't had the bandwidth to do that. But I think it needs to be done. And I think what's out there now is probably grossly understated based on what I understand about ERP and in my years of experience, knowing, if nothing else, just take a trip around the building and look at the number of desks with at least a foot or more of paper standing on them, okay?
It would have been kind of nice to see that 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yes, sir. I wasn't here then.
Councilman Gallagher.
Jack, it was suggested by our expert, and I'm going to ballpark it, say a year ago, that it would be timely, because there was some money leeway in there, to approach the courts and all those in the justice system to put them online with this. He did the costs, and it was relatively low. We never got a response from the administration. Now we're in discussions on a new jail and a potential new justice center, a redo of the justice center, and indications are that the experts that we hired for that project, who are nationally, if not worldwide, recognized in their chosen fields, have gone to the Justice Center and have gone through most of the systems over there, to the point where now they are like, it's, in a word, a mess. So not only are we looking for this ERP system here, the cost for a new center or a redo of our Justice Center and a build of a new jail is going to be pretty big ticket item. Now it seems to me that the cost of the systems over there and their inability to talk to one another and whatever the problems may exist. Did we miss a moment in time by not making a decision a year or so ago at a low cost to at least have the discussion with the courts?
Well, I wasn't in a position to know at that point in time. Have we missed I don't know if we've missed an opportunity even today to do that. I think I say clearly, at least from my experience, and I think Zig would probably agree with this. I think there's any time you can, once you create the tool and the system and the processes, at least for Core County, there's the opportunity to expand that and leverage that at a lower cost to do I believe what you're talking about, which is, start looking at some of these other systems that can leverage what you've already got installed and the processes you've already got installed. I can't speak to a year ago, but what I can speak to is that what we should be doing is overall, in the program overall, is for that group and others, we should be looking to leverage every bit of what we have for these other organizations. But we've got to get the core in first.
Right, and I understand that, but and I have to be fair with them. They're looking at what's going on. Sure. Why would they possibly want to jump in on this? So it's a hard sell. It's a harder sell today with the news that we have as opposed to a year or so ago when I don't think it was that bad of a sell. I'm just wondering if we missed a moment. And again, I think it goes with Mr. Sean saying we have a schematic of the flow of information in this ERP system from the administration, but yet to this day, I still don't know who's in charge. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. I would add one comment to that topic on other systems and whether we missed an opportunity and what we should do going forward. The fact that we're running behind schedule does not automatically negate the value of, once we are live, going to other organizations, primarily because, if nothing else, what they should be looking at, even though we're behind schedule, is all those rocks in the pond that we're going to run over here. We're going to do that before we get to them. And so they're going to have the advantage of that experience and a system that's up and running at some point in time that they can take advantage of. And I just would add that as a possible another perspective on how to look at that.
Mr. Chairman. And I understand that. I do. My concern is our credibility. We have to deal with separately elected groups. We have to be concerned with their rule and taking care of their information. And when they globally look upon us as someone to go with eventually, do they feel comfortable? And I think the answer right today is going to be a resounding no. I think in 10 years, if it's running and it's moving well, sure, it's going to be something to do. But the journey of getting here has been quite difficult.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I have heard you say that we underestimated the state of the county's data conversion. I hear you on that. And I hear you that the 5-year-old bank wreck was a surprise in trying to balance that. So I don't want my question to go without understanding that I hear what you're saying about the delay. But, understanding where we're at 5.5 months to the end of the year, is there any way, understanding what your challenges are, that we can have this finished by the end of the year? Is there any way, out of the box thinking, rather than trying to stay within the current hours that we're in, current personnel, lack of people that we have lost, is there any way, thinking in a different way, of maybe some ideas to keep us within time schedule, that we can get this done by the end of the year? Because every time we delay, there's a reason why we're delaying, and we delay it more, and then we get a delay and we delay it more. It just seems that, where do we draw the line and say, no matter what it takes, it's going to get done at this date? Because I'm not even sure we're going to be done by the end of March. if there's another problem that comes up. So is there any possibility at all, thinking differently about how we can manage this to get this done with success? I don't want a 50% success rate. With success, that this can be done by the end of December.
Believe me, if I thought there was, I would have briefed it that way. I did, in the opening introduction to the monthly report, I make the statement similar to what you're talking about. I think that the key words to your question are, with success, and I define success as we need to be more in the 70, 80, 90% tile of confidence that we can do it without a problem, not down in the 50 or 60% range. So I really don't believe so. We have spent a lot of time brainstorming how, what needs to be done, how can we work around it. Even with these data validation issues, we've got SWAT teams, literally, they're working very, very hard. I want to just shout out at least to the, whatever county team members might be listening in here or hear this, that they're working extremely hard to work through these problems. And I don't want to take that away from them. We will continue. I guess I would say this. If there is a way to do that, I don't think I would withdraw this recommendation that's on the floor and on the table today. But if there's a way to do that, and we can figure that out and save the county money, we will obviously do that. That's my job. But I don't, in terms of the prudent management of our schedule, I would be remiss if I didn't stand in front of you and with the recommendation that we've got on the floor right now.
If I may, what is your success rate percentage ending the end of March? Are we 100% there? Or are we 90%, 80%? Are we a 60 like we are today? Where are we done by the end of March?
Are you asking for my confidence
Yes.
opinion
Yes.
at this point?
Yes.
I would put us in the 90% range for March. Nothing's ever 100%, but I would put it extremely high for March. One of the reasons for that is once we get the data validation issue behind us, then it's all about testing. And we have allowed time for that parallel testing. Also, I guess we'll talk about governance and staffing here in a minute, but one of the things we're able to do is we're also bringing on board the one final piece on project management is we've got a person coming on board that's going to focus on nothing but project management for WFM and payroll together. We're going to manage those as a combined work stream, which was always the plan to bring them together. Now I've got a person to focus on nothing but that area for us to make sure that that we don't drop any balls here. So those are some of the things that contribute to my opinion, gut level opinion here of the 90%
And if I
confidence
may,
level.
I do appreciate it. I know we've worked with you for a while, and we have trusted your judgment, and I'm not changing that now. I believe if you believe that it's needed, then it's needed. It's very disappointing, but I understand it. A logistical question is the payroll, which we are now putting into the first quarter. Just so I can understand, because we've talked about this before, will there be a dual system for 2020? And will W-2s be generated from the new computer system or from the old in the end of 2020?
There would be a duplication, and we have to work through how to bring those balances over so that we can produce the 2020 W-2s, I'm assuming is what you're talking about. 2020 W-2s would come out of the new system.
It would.
But we're going to have to convert those balances and stuff over. So that's part of the, we lose that advantage. I would be remiss not to point that out. We lose the advantage of not having to bring over the accrued amounts or year-to-date amounts for all these different accounts by not going at the end of the year. So there's, in addition to everything else, it does generate that amount of work. We have to bring that over.
And just to follow, is that something that could delay our project? Is that a huge undertaking to convert the first quarter of, I guess, all of that to allow us then to be dependent on the new ERP system?
it's an undertaking. Certainly, it's a set of tasks that we weren't going to have to do before, but it doesn't outweigh the advantage of having more testing and still moving that to the April 1st date.
Okay, that's it for now.
Okay, let's move to slide 11 and continue.
So I believe I've talked in pieces about this slide already. So this just sort of puts some numbers with the staff rotation issue. And I would point out that not everybody left because they weren't happy. We had at least a third or more of these were, believe it or not, medical-related issues that various people had, serious ones that had caused people to roll off the project or not be available for various reasons. So some rotation on a project is expected. That high a percentage for medical reasons is not expected. Okay. So that has had an impact, and that's when I say we don't have sufficient staff to run, for example, two different pieces of procurement in parallel. That's one of the reasons that we just got to be very realistic about what we do have in terms of available staff in all areas. So I think I've certainly covered the other two areas in terms of data validation. I guess I'd like to move on unless there's other. Yes, sir.
I notice you don't have anything about any criminal indictments or anything of that nature listed on. Would that be in your best interest or your best guess, item 15, 16, and 17, as far as people that would be directly involved with this process that have a cloud over them at this point in time? If you had to make a guess, would that be impacting this project?
Well, sir, it'd probably be inappropriate for me to comment on that in terms of whether I think that's an impact or not. If we lose people, it's always an impact. I would just leave it at that.
Okay, and then you're saying that there was not an intent to do an audit of our bank reconciliation in the original scope of this project before we moved the controlling funds for a $1.3 billion organization, that we weren't going to be doing this, and it took us 5 years to get to this point?
No, I don't believe that's what I said.
I'm just trying to look at your slide here.
Okay.
It says it is not in the original Infor scope to do an audit of the 5-year cash management audit findings.
No, what was not in scope was to do a full 1-month production-like simulation of that. There's a difference between that, I think, and doing a full audit. So the normal process for implementing cash and treasury management is that, without taking too deep a dive in here, is that you go through, you set up the mechanism to do the bank reconciliation, and then you train the team on how to establish rules that do automatic bank reconciliation, automatic matching of checks and things. What we found is that, and part of the challenge here with the county long term is that a lot of the matching, because of the way that we're doing cash processing, has to be done manually. So since you can't, if you're going to do it all automatically, you can do a fairly short test and put in rules. While you're actually, you can go live, go in production, and establish those rules sort of on the fly, so that you gradually increase the automatic matching that takes place with cash reconciliation. I'm not going to do a very good job of explaining this, but it can be done in production. In this case, because of the audit finding and because the level of manual work and some of the complexity of the way we're doing cash receipts, the team made the decision here that the best thing to do would be to do a full simulation. And it wasn't obvious until we got into we did actually run through a complete IST on this without doing the full month of reconciliation, and realized that there were enough exceptions that we needed to do a more extensive test. So it was progressive in the way that this evolved. There was always the intent to make sure the system worked and to validate the process. Okay.
That's reassuring.
I can assure you of that. That was never the question. The question is, how expensive do we have to do a full production-like environment, which is a whole different setup that was not in scope for them. That's a different implementation process than Infor normally goes through for bank reconciliation. I don't know if I did that justice, but that's the process.
But my impression was that Infor has done countywide systems and governmental systems in the past in other counties across the country.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they have, I mean, why wouldn't this have been part of the anticipation of what was going to go forward? You were going to get to this point.
I don't know that I have an answer to the question of why it wasn't in the statement of work originally, but it was, other than it's just not the normal process for bank reconciliation would not require that you do a full month production-like simulation here.
But you have to make sure that every type of transaction flows through your simulator, or else you're going to miss something, which means that potentially you have to do an open and close of that month's activities.
So the process is that in their normal implementation is that we establish all the basic rules based on the bank transactions that come in, and then deal with the exceptions in production by just simply saying, oh, here's one that I would normally have to manually match. A team sets up the rule that says in the future I'm going to have this automatic matching take place by putting this rule in place because it may be something I hadn't seen before. In this case, there's so much manual matching that has to take place because of the way the transactions are generated. And I can't dive in detail on that because I'm not an expert in that area. But because of that fact, the only way that we could be sure that everything was going to work properly and it was going to be usable properly for the county was to go through the full simulation. So I don't know that I've answered your question completely.
No, I mean,
don't know that if I can.
Nothing you're telling us is new. Everything you're telling us is stuff that was known at the time the RFQ went out. Everything you're telling us is something that, if, as I recall, the very first shock this body got was, oh, are you guys on cash or are you on accrual basis? I mean, that was a shock that we got hit with, what, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and they said, oh, we didn't realize that when we started on this project. I mean, that you can't get more fundamental than that question itself out there. So it just seems like every couple months we learn something new that was not anticipated, either from our side by sharing it or by the other side. So thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Gallagher, followed by Baker.
Jack, thanks. I'd be careful using loss of staff as any sort of an excuse, because I know for a fact there are individuals on this that no one's listening to. Second, going back to, or still aren't listening to, and should have been listened to. Going back to your statement of why we have the scheduling changes, would not, and it's been this council's position since, at least mine since day one, the council came along after that, but soon thereafter, especially after our crew situation, that an experienced ERP project manager at the beginning, even experienced doing other counties, we wouldn't be here today. That's my position. You don't have to comment on it, but I know the answer. And the answer is no, we wouldn't be here today. We'd be enjoying the fruits of the labors of those that did it right. So I'd be very careful about using the loss of key personnel. They are key personnel, but they're not key personnel if you don't listen to them. And they weren't listened to. And I'll tell you what, I just go out and I mind my own business and I run into somebody at a party or a restaurant and they start telling me what's happening with the ERP and why it's not going to work. 3 weeks ago it happened to me. An individual's like, I do this. I can't do what they want me to do because the guys in front of me aren't doing what they're doing. They're blaming me. What do I do? Mm-hmm. This is 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. So, I mean, there's still huge problems with the management of this. And I'm so happy that you're here. And if you recall, I think we were all happy. We thought you were the project manager. We thought you were the guy. And then they peeled you off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going and going and going. I'm so beat down. I can't be upset anymore. I just wanted to get done. I'm glad you're here. But to hear from employees that are still working at this, they're being blamed. It's not right. It's not right. And I'll tell you what, that takes the employees and it beats them down. And a lot of people have left because of this that we don't hear about. Not these key individuals. Everybody in this county, if you're an employee, is a key individual as far as I'm concerned. But many of those have just left, thrown their hands up and left, got out of here. So it's not that. I'd be very careful about that because I don't buy it. I understand things have happened, things that no one could have foreseen have happened, but I wouldn't use it as an excuse. Now, lastly, and I might be jumping, our next contract, our ask, is that a set fee? Are we done? Is that, or is this open-ended again? Our deliverables that need to be delivered to us by March of 2020, is there a set fee? Are they going to deliver those deliverables by March of 2020? We're done.
Well, we do have a change order that's in the process with Infor that's in the process of being negotiated. So we'll look at the budget numbers for that here in a minute, okay? And we're not done with that process, but you have 3 questions in there, I think, at least, or at least 2.
I probably got 100, but I'll let you get to it.
But we'll get to the budget, but the short answer is, have all the deliverables been identified? And the answer to that question, at least, is yes, okay? And are they covered by the change order? Yes. The only discussion is wording in the change order and the price, okay? All right.
Ms. Baker.
Yes, and I do hear my colleague questioning the ERP people and the loss, but there are, I think, some significant people in this list, like the deputy CFO and the ERP payroll lead and the payroll processor. I mean, in this 14 list that you give, how many of those have we been able to secure, if any? And which on this list are an absolute in order for you to be successful by the end of March? I would think do we have a ERP payroll lead right now?
We do. Part of in the case of the payroll lead, that was a contract person. At least that's the one that's listed here. And I think I'd mentioned this before. It's a person that took severely ill. Had cancer, as a matter of fact. So we have replaced a payroll lead, and there's notes throughout both the monthly report and the brief here about how well that's going. We managed to make up the 2.5 or 3 months that person was out, and in terms of delivering files that Infor needs for testing and that kind of stuff. So we've caught most of that up. We still have a lot of work to do, but that's a good example of replacing somebody and then trying to make up that ground and actually making up at least that part of the project.
In the list that you have here, I know we've talked in prior meetings that it's hard to find people to fill these positions, and we make it close and then we lose them. So of this list that you have, are most of them going to be outsourced? Or are you thinking that these can be done through the normal hiring process? I think at a meeting we had, you said that the way that we process employees is very long and complicated. And so is there anything there that we can do to help assist, or are you thinking that we're going to need to outsource?
Well, some of
get
these
this done?
positions really can't be outsourced. Certainly, critical positions on the county side. A deputy CFO is not something you could just outsource.
Right.
Even if you did go down that path, the knowledge base that was with that person is gone
Right.
at this point. So anybody else would be starting from scratch. A contractor coming in to do that job wouldn't make any sense. And there's several of these positions like that. The things that are more ERP-based or technically based, certainly we've got contractors in place for that. It's a separate agenda item here that Andy will talk about related to the main sale contract. But some of these positions, you just can't do this with contract.
And can you
contractors.
be successful in not being able to hire what's needed because of the complexity of the job, and you can't expect someone to get up to speed in a few months. Are we able to complete this project by the end of March, given that this list won't be fulfilled?
Well, I took into account the fact that this list might not be fulfilled in looking at that schedule. That's the reason I make this statement that we just can't do some of these things concurrently because there's not sufficient staff on the county side with the knowledge base that only the county has about their own systems and their own data to do that. So I've done our best to account for the fact that these slots may or may not actually be filled where they're still vacant at this point.
But still successful with the project?
Yes, ma'am.
With those compromises?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, could you quickly do slides 12, 13, and 14?
So this slide was just to emphasize for everybody's information here what the process is for data validation and data cleansing. So the list on the left, basically, you know, why do we have problems with data in the first place? Why does any organization have problems with data? Obviously, manual data entry is going to have some errors associated with it. Trying to do things in parallel, you know, enter data into multiple places at the same time creates the same problem or worse problem. Data that's not formatted the same in multiple places, you know, all these kinds of things here, without going through that entire list here, contribute to the state of data. And when you take that and you do that over, you know, a 20-year period, it just makes that more complex. So it makes it very difficult to predict the reliability of the data. And even as we, I mentioned the term, you know, how do you combat this, which is kind of the next slide down here, but looking ahead and doing a better job of looking ahead means that we're going to look at the data, but you know, I think we need to pay more attention. If the lessons learned out of this, we continue to get better, but I think the lesson learned out of this is to look ahead at the data, try to do a little more deep dive analysis on some of this stuff and make sure we're not missing a data source that needs to be coordinated, or, you know, the details inside of some of these files need to be looked at to make sure we understand what we're getting, and always assume the worst at this point. I don't think I assumed the worst in every case, and that's on me. Okay. So the process on the right-hand side is pretty much what we do now. You know, we pull the data from wherever it is, or maybe multiple sources. We do a technical validation. You know, is it data we can work with? Is a number really a number? Or is it a combination of, are there characters inside of numbers where they're not supposed to be? That kind of thing. And then we hand that over to the business in a format that they can look at, and we say, validate this, because they're the ones that actually own the data. Translate that into what it needs to look like to load into the new system. You know, usually we'll do a trial load. Okay, we'll take a few records, make sure that it's actually usable, that it'll go into Infor properly. Then do the full load. Then we go back and pull it back out of the Infor system and feed it back to the business owners and say, this is how it came out. This is how that load looked after it went in. Compare that to your original data. Is this data usable in the current format in the new system? So that's the process. So there's a lot of steps involved here, and that's one of the reasons it takes time. And that's just wanted to kind of point out that it's a data cleansing as much as a data validation process in this case with the county's data, because we're having to clean it up, validate it, all the stuff we just finished talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yes, sir. I think this next one, how do we avoid further slippage, certainly related to these topics? I think the first thing, one of the key things here, at least the first on this list here, is making sure that we got the right project management team in place going forward. I'll get to a slide that just talks about that in a second. I think we've made some significant progress to put the right organization in place. Data validation procedures, look ahead, I've already talked about. Just a couple of quick comments on ownership and stewardship of data. I think that's a misunderstood topic sometimes. Who owns the county's data, right? I would stand here and tell you that I look to each director of each area as the owner of that data. They're responsible for their data. An army of IT guys can't clean up data that nobody takes ownership for. They'll never get it right. So I look to directors to do that. Now, data stewardship means those are the guys that actually support the data owner in getting that data translated and usable and looked at and, all that stuff that was on the previous chart. So IT can be a data steward, but IT cannot be a data owner. Okay, I just want to make that decision. That sounds like a nuanced statement, but it's really, really important, because if we have problems with data in any area, I'm going to turn around to the director, and we already do this, and say, okay, I need people to take care of this problem because it's your data, and you're the only ones that really understand this data at enough depth to take ownership of it and to fix it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. The next one we talked about, replace county staff as quickly as possible. We probably beat that one to death, but it's just, obviously, I think anything we can do to make that happen faster. I'm not in control of the county's hiring process there, but happy to participate and help in those areas. And I think structure and strengthen the PM group to plan data migration. I think just making sure that as the project management group has the right stuff in place to make sure that we're tracking data migration and data validation in enough depth so that we really understand far in advance, as far as possible, when we're going to run into a problem. Okay. Moving on to the next
Councilman
slide.
Sean.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you've indicated that you've seen some projects that have dragged out. Did they too have a staff problem when they got to this point of dragging out? I can assume they must. People don't want to be around a sinking ship.
Well, I think, I'd like to talk to that, because I think with Councilman Gallagher, kind of back to the morale of it, just to use a single word, to sum up both of those kinds of questions here. Yeah, I think that there's that at this stage of a project, when you've had people that have been doing this since 2000, some of them have been involved since 2014, since the inception, I guess, of the contract process, I think people get tired. I think one of the things that we need to do, and I've stood before this body 2 months ago and said it, and we haven't done a good job of that yet, but I plan to try to do much better, is I think communicating with everybody and encouraging by talking to not only to the other agencies that we're about to go out and work with, but also just internally to our team to make sure everybody understands that we can get to the end, number one, that it can be a good experience, although it's a lot of hard work, and that the benefits, back to the benefits question that came up earlier, that these benefits really are there for the county. I just don't think we've emphasized that hardly at all with everybody. We've all been heads down. It's very easy to get heads down in a PM role and say, I got to get these tasks done, without painting the broader image to everybody. For this is why we do this, because this is going to help all these processes and help the county run for the next 20 years.
Well, I applaud you putting the 4 bullets down, but the pragmatist in me says that you are going to have a difficult time finding staff, especially like the 14 you had there, when it's in this particular condition. I mean, we're having trouble finding staff anyway, but
Yeah.
then to ask them to get on board to help be part of the ERP solution, I think that's to have it as a point. I applaud you, but the reality of it, I think the word quickly as possible. I think that it's not a realistic goal that to even be putting on a piece of paper with the way the conditions are right today.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think you weren't true, but I'm not going to argue that point with you, because we're experiencing it every day. So,
Of course you are. I feel sorry for you. Thank you.
okay.
Yeah, the one thing is we can't have, we got to have everybody system-wide on board. We can't have one person say, well, we'd get it done if it weren't for this group didn't do this and this group, we can't have that. We need everybody,
Yeah.
everybody doing their part.
And just to your point, sir, I don't hear a lot of that internally from our team. You know, I think what I hear across our project management team a lot is, it's not, I can't get it done, I want to blame somebody else. It's, I can't get it done and I'm waiting for this input. How do we figure out how to make whatever that thing is happen a little faster? There's a lot of cooperation that is going on that probably gets overlooked and needs to be recognized in the team. I don't hear a lot of that feedback, at least not to me directly. Maybe they're not telling me that, but I don't.
Okay, let's get to the one piece of good news we got. Next slide.
Okay.
Ms. Simon.
Just before we move on, I have a question. The position of the IT director has been, totally just void for a long time. And, we've got somebody who apparently is still a county employee, this Scott Rourke, and he's just sitting there. But what's the problem with filling that? Is it because he's still on as a county employee? Do you know about that?
I'm not the right person to answer that question. Honestly, that's more of an probably an HR related question. I'm just not, probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to do that as a contractor either, to be honest with you. But
I mean, we're just
so I don't
reporting
know.
that people don't want to work here. They're not coming. People are leaving for various reasons. And then I'm wondering if that's complicating this whole, mosaic. I mean,
I agree 100%.
it just doesn't make any sense. And you're up here telling us there's a problem. Well, who can tell us, why that is? Why this person who should be at the top, that position's been vacant, but yet somebody's still an employee. I mean, somebody needs to answer that, Mr. Chair, at some point.
Yeah.
If it weren't his first day, I'd ask the chief of staff, but I'm going to give you a pass.
Okay.
Day
Thank
two,
you.
day two, though, right?
All right. Yes, ma'am.
You're going to look ahead for and expect the worst for the data conversion. Are you anticipating that the ownership from our directors, do you anticipate that to be an obstacle that, we didn't go to the ERP system because everything was running well. So I would anticipate that that is a normal challenge, that ownership of each directors would be probably not in the neatest organized. So how, looking ahead for worst case scenario, are you paying a lot of attention to that data ownership and getting ahead of it before we need to get there?
Have I paid enough attention in the past? Probably not.
Well, moving
Do I need to
forward.
pay attention to ownership going forward? Absolutely.
You are.
And is there an escalation process if we don't feel we're getting cooperation? Yes.
Okay.
I think those are the 3 points that I, if nothing else, lessons learned on making sure that we get this handled.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Moving on to the next slide here. Just a couple of comments on this one. I just want to point out that I think the last time that I put this org chart in front of everybody, there was a lot of vacant spots on the PM side. And we've actually filled probably all of them except one. And I think that's going to help us going forward. So I'd mentioned already the project manager for WFM and payroll. Just joining us today, as a matter of fact, probably rolling in the building right about now. And somebody to help in fiscal accounting, Connie got us there. Tom Petak is back, and he was gone for a while, and I've got him out working with EAM. And that's EAM is implemented, but the interfaces to EAM back to procurement and finance are not implemented. So it's important that we have that attention out there. And also, I've been gracious enough to get some admin support from somebody within the IT department as well. So I think that's going to help us going forward. Okay.
This is good news that we got these positions filled, and it's easy to get dragged down by all the other stuff that we're dealing with. But this is going to make a difference, and
Yes, sir.
And I'm happy to see this report. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, may I have
Yes.
just a question on your project structure. Why, Jack, are you below the acting CTO and the ERP PMO and the ERP ESS, aren't you, for the most part, overseeing everyone under the executive sponsor?
I guess I hadn't thought about the visual there, to be honest with you. Yes, the short answer. The ESC is headed by Matt, although obviously we both work together with that group. The PMO is something that I manage. So I guess I could elevate myself in the structure, but the reality is that's the way it's being managed.
So the reality is that's the way it's. So do we have, I guess I don't understand how you're watching the entire project, giving this complete overview if you're not at the top of the organizational chart. I mean,
Well, I guess I am. So
Okay.
I guess I'm
but not
sure
according
what
to
the
this
confusion is.
chart. Not according to this chart, you're not. If someone were to look at this chart, they would say Andy Moles, Matt Carroll, and the technical team is on their own, and the policy and future is on their own, and then it gets to you. And I don't think that's the way this is being run.
No.
Okay.
So I probably need to adjust
Wouldn't
it.
you bump up right under Matt Carroll, I would say, at a minimum?
That's the reality. That's what I meant by that. That is the reality of how things are actually operating. So
And
I
your
can adjust the chart.
coordination with Andy Moles, the CTO, how does that, are you equal with him? Are you both? What is-
I'm certainly co-equal. Andy deals with all of the rest of IT, all the infrastructure, all of the different pieces that happen every day that keep everything running for the county. I just deal with the project and the program.
So equal, but two different skills.
Two different roles.
So
Yes,
if we
ma'am.
were to do this again, and can we change this organizational chart?
Sure.
So that we get I mean, it's always been a concern that we have no one that's running the ship, and clearly you are.
I am, and I apologize. It's the first time anybody had actually pointed out what I guess is obvious when I look at the chart there. We can adjust the chart for a better visual.
Thank you.
Okay, Jack, please elevate yourself on the chart, and we'll see it revised in the next report.
Okay.
Councilman Gallagher.
The chart goes to the problems from the beginning, Jack. This is what we objected to at the beginning, is that the person in your position right now should have been at the top, should have taken responsibility for the entire project. And we asked, and I believe it goes back to Scott with 1T before he disappeared into what I don't know, he was responsible. Then I thought there was somebody before Mike Young, but Mike Young stood right there with Matt Carroll, and I said, whose head rolls if this goes out of control? Begrudgingly, Mike Young said, it's me. Well, he beat feet out of here when we asked him the tough question on a $300,000 misstep and retired mysteriously. The only thing that's changed, the only thing that hasn't changed at the top up here is the executive sponsor. Mm-hmm. And I have pointed to that as a problem. That person has no business being there. No business being in front of someone like you with the expertise to do this project. It's either that person or the executive himself that has begrudgingly allowed you to in. I don't know how you jump over that, because they don't want that. That has been a problem, and that's the reason we're here today. I'm convinced, unless somebody can tell me some other way, whose head rolls here? There's responsibility. So taxpayer dollars. And this isn't a question for you, it's a question for the administration. Quite honestly, somebody should be fired. And I guess they get out of Dodge before they get fired, or the heat's too hot and they get out of here. Or who knows what. But nobody's been held responsible for anything during this project. And it goes back, you're right. The morale of the employees is horrible because they're getting the hell beat out of them by the people at the top. There's intimidation going on. We all know it. We all see it. It's screwed up. To me, it's pretty simple. I think you know, but you're not in a position to talk, and I wouldn't put you in that position. But this chart has to dramatically change for us to even get through March, in my opinion. We'll see.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I can follow up, I know you want to move on, but if this chart is we're looking at a chart that has executive sponsor above Mr. Ryan, why don't we have the executive sponsor ask, I mean, I want to, through the chair, ask if there's any answers to the questions that Mr. Ryan's not been able to answer. Is there anything that Mr. Carroll might add, since he's at least for now on top of this chart?
If I could ask, Congresswoman, what is the question on this?
Well, one of them was our IT director who left. We had an acting, there's been a vacancy there, and somebody's still technically an employee. I kind of want to know the answer to that.
Okay. I thought the question was, should I report to the executive sponsor? And what I was going to answer was that's a very normal, that's the normal program management structure, is that there's an executive sponsor, there's a program manager, and then there's project management underneath that. And having a program manager report to an executive sponsor in the business is just that's very, very common, and that's the usual hierarchy.
We've been asking, our ZIG has been recommending for a long time that we have one central person at the top. And so what I'm hearing from you is that would be an aberrant way to move forward or operate a project of this
I
nature?
didn't mean to say that. I think Zig and I agree on that. When he says one central person at the top, I'm running the program. That decision was made in terms of the ERP program. And there's an executive sponsor for that program, and that's Matt Carroll in this case. So I guess I'm not sure where the confusion might lie. I'm trying to
Well,
answer the question.
Okay, forget. I don't know. I'm more confused now looking at this chart and hearing your answers than I was at the beginning. No offense to you. It's just I don't think.
Okay, I'd love to. I'd love to help there. I'm not sure how in this case. Okay.
Okay. We got to move on to the
Mr.
budget.
Chairman, where would you like to go? To the
35.
Okay. So this slide on page 35 depicts what we anticipate, that's the forecasted or estimated change to the budget. And just to walk through kind of the organization of this chart versus the normal monthly report, budget report, the pages that follow have the June 30th report in them for the budget. Okay. But rather than go there, if you look at line 1, there's a reference line on the left-hand side there. So if you look at line 1, the numbers across the top in line 1 are extracted from the June 30th balances of all those different ERP accounts that are in the monthly report that you see each month. So that's the starting point as of June 30th for each of these categories of expenses: consulting services, backfill support, and so forth across the top. So it's sort of taking what you see in a vertical format and just putting it across horizontally so that we can categorize where increases are going to occur by the category. Under consulting services, what you see here is the Infor, sort of change order 33. It's not referenced that way here, but the Infor professional services through December, which was the original change order that Infor drafted and gave to us. Their current proposal is $2.7 million. What is estimated by me, not confirmed by Infor at this point, is what would the additional amount be required to take us all the way through April, given all the schedule changes we just finished talking about. And I'm estimating that to be roughly $1 million. I'm also estimating that we would need that we should put in place a contingency. 10% is probably minimal. Possibly it should be a little more, but at least the bare minimum contingency would be 10% of the total, whatever the total change order amount ends up to be. The next line down is open enrollment support from Infor. They have consulting services on site to help us get through the open enrollment process. there's probably a discussion that I have not had with OBM. Is that an operational expense or is that an ERP expense? One could argue that either way, and I'll just have to get a reading from OBM on what they want to do with that expense. So it's currently listed where it's listed right now as an ERP expense. Okay. The mainsail contract, which it would be inappropriate for me to speak directly to that other than here's the number proposed by mainsail to keep our consultants engaged in many of those positions that we've already talked about in previous discussion on staffing. And that, I think that's before the committee today. And then I think the other amounts, just to go to line 10 and to the $1.5 million, that's the total amount converted from operational to capitalized expense for the project, at least in the report from OBM earlier this month. And the next line down is an estimated amount for those capitalized expenses for the remainder of the year, or I'm sorry, through February of next year. And that was an estimate that we worked on in conjunction with, or got in conjunction with OBM staff. And there is a small amount here for MHC. It's just an additional license that we had overlooked that we need to pick up for using MHC services. And then there's an Infor licensing for the next round of licensing for our software for Infor for 2021 time period for $1.2 million. So those constitute all of the changes and
Now, that item on
increases.
line 13, is that an item that we would have to pay anyway, but would have been categorized as operational, but is now being put in the project, or is this a new expense that we had not anticipated?
I believe this is something we would have to pay anyway.
Right.
So how it's categorized, I'm not an expert in how to categorize it at this point. So
Okay.
we'll go to the county's guidance on that. Below the line, subtracted from ERP, moved to operational, that area. These things were identified, I believe, as OBM as things that would come out of operational budget. Hopefully those numbers all match up with theirs. So the net out of this is that the overall program budget is now at $32,355,969.
So, Director Keenan? Since Zig Berzins has been consulting with us about issues relating to the installation of this project from the beginning and continues to this day, why is the Zico consultant contract being moved to operational?
Maggie Keenan, Office of Budget Management, it's not. It's staying in the capital project.
Okay.
So that item number 17, that should not read that way, and we should take that out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, fine.
Okay. All right. That's my error.
Okay. So add $338,800 to the bottom line number.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Questions by my colleagues? Ms. Baker's first out of the gate this time.
All right. We've heard a lot through Board of Control on this Fund 99 that comes from Infor. So is there any funding left in the Infor contracts that could help us with this, or are we exhausted on it, or what's the status of the?
We do have some money in Fund 99. I did not bring the accounting for that with me, but I can provide that. I think I may have provided that separately in another brief, as it was about 2 weeks ago. I can certainly provide that.
Does that help this situation, or is
it helps some? It helps some. I want to say something on the order of 150,000, something like that. That's as as if we we've done and Infor has worked through this and found items that were in the original deliverable list that we don't need. So part of that has been, they've recently gone through and repurposed some of those funds and put them back in Fund 99, which means as we run across the occasional modification that needs to be done, report that needs to be done that's not in scope, that we can take the funds out of Fund 99 to do that. So it's been useful for that. So I think currently there may be about 150,000. I can confirm specifically.
Is that reflected in this, or is that already absorbed before you get here?
It's not reflected here. I think it's probably reflected overall, and I'll let Janelle speak to that on the monthly report, but
Okay.
I don't have it in this list specifically.
Okay.
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 Other questions?
I think we'll go to Councilman Gallagher.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Jack, we're 32.7 now, give or take, on a 21.6 contract from the beginning. Now, up until when Young was still here, and I don't know if he can answer this, if he can't, you can't, but there was testimony in front of this council that, yeah, we're fine, we're on track, we're on schedule. When did you know that 32.7 was going to be the number? Recently?
I would say recently. I mean, we have, obviously, we're in the number of variables here.
Right.
Number one, we're in the process of negotiating with Infor numbers. Number two, having just made the decision over the last week, somewhat agonizingly, I might add, and including over the weekend, and estimating what that number is. I really did not know that we were at 32 until we did all the math and, put that together. So it's not something that it's not like we're sitting here having done that for a long period of time.
Should not our team, back just before Young left, should they not have known that we were going to have this day eventually?
No, I would not characterize it that way. We didn't, all these things that we just finished talking about, the things that we've just, data discovery, staff, all that, without rehashing everything we talked about for the last 30 minutes, there's no way that Mike Young could have known that we'd be standing here today with this exact situation. So it'd be unfair to characterize it that way.
So 3 months ago, this jumped off 3 months ago, 90 days, maybe I'll give him 120 days. I forget when he officially retired, but I remember the day.
Okay.
So all this happened in 90 to 120 days. All this financial bad news happened in that short of a span. I'm having a hard time believing that.
I think that what is fair to characterize here is that as I said earlier, as we've approached each one of these modules and understood exactly the data integrity, the impact of staffing loss, and those kind of things that have those discoveries, the bank reconciliation and the data validation issues have occurred in the last 90 days and have impacted us in the last 90 days. Okay. And I think that's what's fair.
So going back to my original statement, that a seasoned ERP project manager at the beginning would have seen that, because they would have gone through it at some other county in the United States of America that they had the same problems with. County is not unique, only in the fact that we don't do anything right, evidently. We are not unique, and you fall back, I'm not saying you, but we fall back on the fact, oh, this is unique. No, it's not. It's not unique. This has been nothing but a cluster, and to suggest 90 to 120 days ago that millions of dollars just jumped off the page at us and, oh, we got to come to the rescue. I just have a hard time making any heads or tails out of that.
Just a couple comments for everybody's attention. One piece of it, certainly there's a lot more to it, but one piece of it is that it's only been in the last week that the final decision is made that we cannot make December, and it's going till April, and that accounts for certainly line 4 of the million. for the additional services in the first quarter and possibly some other items. So that part came very late. The other thing I would mention is that this chart in line 3, it uses Infor's $2,705,225 for number for the Infor services. That's their number. That's the maximum number on that item. You were being conservative, but
Yes, sir.
that number is in negotiation and hopefully might come down by a couple 100,000 or something like that. So that could come down a little bit. So then we had Councilman Tron, I believe.
Well, that, to your point on this, Mr. Chairman, the 2.7 might come down, but for the fact that Jack has also said my confidence is only in the 90% that we're going to hit March. So you have to anticipate, if you're going to argue on the one side, it might come down, it also might go up. If this floats past that March date, we know that time is money in a consulting agreement. So it's just as likely, not just likely. Yeah, I don't want to say I want to bet against our team, but it's highly likely that based on past experience that these dates keep floating and floating and floating. And I congratulate Jack for having the tenacity to sit there and say, yes, these things came out 90 days ago. To my colleague, shame on us for not knowing this stuff. That's what we believe would have happened if we would have had a dedicated leader 2 years ago, a year ago, 8 months ago. Fill in the blank. We would have started to get this picture, would have shown the clarity to which you have had the guts to bring forward to us. And none of us want to see this project go down the tube. All of us want to see it be successful. And so we're going to be left with a Hobson's choice. I have a feeling, because I know where I'm going to be. We've got this much money invested in it. I'm going to support the next round of expenditures because it needs to be done, because we've got to. We've got too much taxpayer money invested in this project out there. And sadly, we never have even heard, other than post fact, from Public Works as to the advantages that we're going to get out of the system. You tell me it's out there. I'm thrilled that it's out there. But we should have heard this from the HR department. We should have heard it from every department going through as to what the significant advantages are to the taxpayer for spending now $32 million. And I'll be shocked if we end up at 32. Thank you.
So line 3 only covers Infor services through December of 2019, and line 4 covers those services through April of 2020. But Councilman Tron is certainly right that if we get a further delay, well, then a new additional item will have to be tacked on later. Ms. Baker.
Jack, didn't we say at a pre-meeting to this in preparation that there was a project manager, probably hired by Mainsail, that would be hired to help get us to the finish line? Is that still part of the goal or not?
Yeah, yes, and that was in the chart, without going back there right now.
I'm sorry.
That was one of the people that was onboarded in the line of project managers that have been filled already.
Okay, so you still feel that in this late date, and we see a finish line at the end of March, that even bringing a project manager in for the next 9 months is the wise thing to do and will help us get to the goal?
Absolutely. And in this particular case, the most recent person to join is the one that I'd mentioned earlier that's going to be focused on payroll and workforce management. So I've been oversighting that area predominantly. I need another set of eyes and ears and hands on that specific process in every day,
Okay.
8 or
Just
10
wanna
hours a
make
day.
sure.
So.
The 8 million difference between the 24 million and the 32 million, or almost 33, can you get your arms around how much more this project is costing us to go the extra quarter into 2020? All right, I mean, I know that the million on line 4, and of course, the contingency, but of that 8 million, some of this is for services through December 2019, and then
So I guess the short answer,
Right.
I don't
What
know if there
is-
is a short answer to your question. Obviously,
Yeah.
the million is specifically identified for that. Part of the mainsail cost is identified with that, and then there's some other, and I don't have that number in my head in terms of how to split that, but we can get that number for you.
If it's 50%, I'd just like to know how much more it's costing us to go that extra quarter.
Okay, I can get that number for you. I don't want to, that old saying, he who shoots from the hip shoots himself in the foot. I'd rather get the actual number for you.
Thank
So,
you.
okay.
It would also include part of the $400,000 in line 11. At this point, I'm going to call up the acting director to present the mainsail
Okay,
legislation.
all right, thank you.
Sandy Moles, interim CTO for Department of IT. I think we've pretty much covered a lot of ground here. It's been a long afternoon. Appreciate everyone's time for your attention and comments. Mainsail was selected as a small business, veteran business for this project through the ERP. Basically, the county engaged with Mainsail to staff augmentation for utilizing their GSA contract. This is actually the third amendment that we're requesting. The original contract was $450,000. Then we had two additional amendments that were $470,000, which was January 2019 and April 2019. This was a forecasted, based on what we are currently spending, we forecasted it out. Then we added the 15% contingency on top of that, which came out to $1,453,899.
So, am I correct that this contract extends through March 31st of 2020?
Yes, sir. 3/21/2020.
Well, with the last go live now scheduled for April 1 of 2020, are we going to be able to end all these mainsail services on 3/31? My understanding is that there's usually some post-production time required for general cleanup and post-go live testing and such things. My question is whether whether this change order incorporates the new schedule or whether it needs to be extended longer.
No, sir, Councilman. We added that into the cost. Actually, as of each module completes, there will be a post support, and that's already been included in the cost structure. So as the module completes, they'll roll off, they'll go in post support for a period of time, but then they disappear. Based on our calculations, by the end of December, our spend will be down to, it's hard to say, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but roughly between $50,000 and $70,000 compared to what we're paying today as of June.
So, am I reading correctly into what you're saying that there might be some work on this contract done past 3/31?
No, sir, there will not be.
Well, how is the post-production support on the payroll and workforce management going to be done, or will we not need any mainsail services to do that?
Well, the mainsail, once the production, the modules has been cut over as of April, they will be sticking around. That money's already been rolled into that cost. So we should be, could be, it's, as my teacher used to say, ifs and buts and candy and nuts every day would be Christmas. But we should be complete after a period of time of post-support. I think they're just going to be watching, fixing minor problems, but that money has already been included in the cost. That's what the 15% contingency was.
So what you're saying is there might be some work required beyond March 31st, but that it's included in the contract and that officially the end date is the 31st.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Councilman Schwan.
Yeah, to pick up on that, you're indicating, at least as I understand your contingency, you're sitting on a little over $210,000 to cover that last month. Is that?
Yeah, when we forecasted out, it was 1.2. We added the 15% on top of it, which came out to 1.4.
Oh,
1.5. Yeah.
Okay, so you're when you're saying it's 15%, it's not of the 1.4. It's you got this. You have roughly
15% of
the
added on to
1.2.
1.2. Correct.
Okay, all right. So you're sitting on 180,000, 190,000 someplace.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And can you describe to us how much urgency there is about this legislation being passed quickly? What causes that urgency, and where does that stand?
Wow, where do you start? I mean, we've been talking about this for, a couple hours now? 5 hours? 5 years. Oh, 5 years. Without the mainsail, I mean, they brought in, because of the fact of the staffing, they're source matter experts in their field. They've been working diligently with the other departments and staff. Right now, I have to commend, all the county workers because they're doing double duty. They're working their normal jobs while they're working with the contractors at Bay, doing the user testing. So bottom line is without that staff, and we all talked about our hiring situation here, we could not be moving forward.
So is there money in the existing mainsail contract, or has it been depleted?
No, there's still existing money.
How much longer before that money is exhausted?
I have to consult with my financial expert.
Janelle Green, Department of IT. This amount will carry us probably to the end of July that we have left in the contract. The current amendment that's out.
So if we pass this legislation at the next council meeting, we could operate with no interruption of service and without people having to be asked to work without a contract. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Baker.
Two things. One is for Janelle, if you don't mind. We had on Board of Control 514 that was asking for us for no additional funds to take a 6-month expired contract and renew it until, trying to read here, I think until the end of the year. Is that still going to be needed, given that we're reorganizing here? And
That one was for the agenda manager portion for a Highland contract.
Yes.
So once we got shut down in that meeting, we went back to the team and just looked at resources and just their ability to perform the tasks. So looking at the resources and having contacted that department, or excuse me, that functional area of IT, it was established that we can do it internally. It'll be a challenge, but they can do it. The team can do it internally versus going to extend that particular contract out.
so you will not be back to Board of Control?
Not for that one, no.
Okay, a second question I had, not for you, Janelle, but we have a contingency of 15%, and it was just clarified that that was for the post-production support. It's now July of 2019, and this is going to end in March of 2020. And it would be good if we could perhaps identify the 15% contingency as post-support, so that when we get into March of next year, we're not asked to add more dollars to the project because there's continued support that's needed, and we didn't remember that the 15% contingency was for that purpose.
Did you want to line up?
I just think
Put it as
that's,
a light item?
yeah, wherever it is, we should identify
We can
the
do that.
15% as post-support, not just contingency on the project.
We can do that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Council.
Any other questions about the mainsail contract? Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not a question, it's just, I can see you're wrapping up here, so, I think. So, I thought I'd chime in. I'm happy to see that there's been a reorganization in the project. I have some confidence about that. I don't see that the council has, or that the county has any choice, in spite of the additional costs, to move on with this important project. I'll just say one last time, I don't think that the people that were here 6 months ago, given how talented they were, by reputation, could not have known a lot about what was going to happen. And I don't think it's any mystery that they're not around here when this day comes. But I want to say to the council that I think we're in a position where we need to go forward with this project in spite of the additional burden.
With that, as the chair, it's not my usual style to offer the motions, but I think that I need to provide leadership on this. So I'm going to make a motion to refer Resolution 2019-0158 to the full council with a recommendation to leadership that it be placed on the agenda for the next council meeting for second reading suspension, and to see if I get a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is so recommended.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
I'm going to call back Jack, Mr. Ryan, for a moment.
Yes, sir.
Just want to see if, very quickly, if there's anything that we skipped over that you think absolutely should be mentioned, or do you think we've covered the most important points?
I think we've covered the most important point, at the risk of not wanting to PowerPoint the entire council to death here with
Okay.
everything else. The monthly, I would point out that virtually everything, and in more detail, is in the monthly report. I specifically held a monthly report so that these two activities were coordinated, and it's out there for everybody to review as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any miscellaneous business? Hearing none, nothing further holds our attention. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.